as I mentioned earlier, this is the weekend we celebrate Swami Kriyananda's birthday. And that particular reading of the Whispers, I often think in terms of Swami G, his desire to be an instrument for God, and particularly an instrument of Divine Mother as expressed by his Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda. That was the essence of his life. It was the focus of his life, and it was what he expressed, and his one wish was, of course, to be a good disciple of his Guru. And to be a good disciple meant to be a channel for him. It meant to be a channel for him in everything we do, to feel that Master's blessings was flowing through him, not for himself alone, but that he might be an expression of those blessings to other people. And I think this is the lesson that we also take. I know in the spiritual path, Paramahansa Yogananda, Masters, we call him, he's our guru, but he's such an exalted figure in some ways. He's like so beyond, he was the perfect master. And we admired that and we aspired to that. But for me, Swami was more, you might say, a day-to-day representative for that. He was somebody that I could actually grasp. Now, the fact that I did know him, that helped, of course. But nevertheless, he was real to me. He was a person who struggled in his life. In many ways, he struggled. We see him and we recognize his greatness, but that greatness came at a cost of struggle, and we can see that. I could see that, and so in a sense, I look in myself. I struggle. You struggle, and so to have somebody by your side who is also in the struggle, but yet going forward in whatever came, facing those struggles, and making God, Guru, attunement with that a priority, the priority in his life. Now, if we look at his life, we can see and we can read, and he told the story often of his coming to Yogananda. But it reminded me, I'd like to start with first mentioning a story that is well told many times about the young disciple who went to the Guru and said, "Please, I wish to be your disciple." And the Guru took him down to the river, and the disciple, thinking, oh, he was going to initiate me. And he took him to the river, got into the river with him, and took the disciple by the hair and put his head under the water and left it there until the boy couldn't breathe anymore and began to struggle violently to get up and get to the surface. But the Guru held him under until the very last moment. He pulled him out, and the boy, and the Guru says, "What was that which you wanted most right before I pulled you up?" And the boy said, "Air, I wanted air." He says, "When you want God, in that same fervor, come back." And that's what it takes. It takes that sort of dedication. If we look at Swamiji's life, he tells when before he came, he met Master. And even before he came to consider God as potentially the answer that he was looking for in life. And he said he struggled, and he struggled. Now, he came from a well-to-do family, modestly, successful family. His father was a successful geologist, oil geologist. So he did not lack in material things. He had a good education. He did not lack in that. He was a handsome young man, so people are attracted to him. He didn't lack in that. He was well spoken. He was a natural leader. People were attracted to him for that. He was an artistic sort, and he was successful in trying to pursue that. He could sing well. He could on and on and on. He could do all. He was, you might say, outward circumstances. He had everything, but in his own mind, he had nothing, because he had an emptiness inside of himself. And he said he just didn't know what to do. He said he was desperate. He was desperate. And of course, at that time, he had tried religion, or thinking the religion he knew, the traditions he was brought up in, empty for him. It's had nothing to say to him. Now he speaks, he said he probably didn't pursue the mystical side underneath it, but he wasn't mature enough at that time. It was empty. And he said he was desperate. He was really desperate. He reached that point where he just didn't know where to go, and he was in despair. And he came at that moment, finally, one night, he began to think, well, maybe there is something greater in this world. I'm not going to find it in this world, but it's beyond. And he began to kind of reconsider, perhaps it's God's the answer, but what is God? And he began to pursue that. And he came to an inner thought of God must be consciousness, something beyond what I have been taught, but something deeper. And with that in mind, he said, if that's true, then the pursuit of God is what my life will be dedicated to. That must be the answer. And he dedicated himself to that pursuit. Now, the interesting thing is, you have to come to that point of either, now in his case, it doesn't necessarily have to be despair, but you do have to come to that point. Swami Kriyananda, years later, had a satsang when he was actually in India. He gave a satsang and he made a couple of points. It's about being successful on the spiritual path. Somebody had asked him that question, and one of the points he made, he says, honestly, if you want to be successful, it has to be for you a matter of life and death. And anything less, and you will pursue that. People say they want God, but they want a lot of other things too. I know there's last couple of weeks ago, I gave a class in Gurgaon satsang, and afterwards a person came up to me and after the class and said, you meditate in the morning at the ashram? I said, yes, I do. He says, I want to come meditate with you in the morning. I said, oh, good. I'll unlock the gate for you in the morning, and you can come meditate with me in the morning. Oh, good. And so all that week, 5 o'clock, I'd go out, I'd unlock the gate. And he didn't come Monday. He didn't come Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. And by Saturday, I wasn't unlocking the gate anymore. He didn't come. Now, I didn't blame him, because I honestly kind of thought that might happen. But he wanted to come meditate. You see, he wanted to come meditate, but life got in the way for whatever it was. And isn't that the story of a lot of us? We want to meditate, and we want to do this, but there's a lot of other things to do too, and we don't make that step of whatever. He wanted to have that which it take that would allow him to come in the morning at 5 o'clock, but he didn't have it. Well, that's not such an uncommon thing. When Swami Kriyananda went to SRF and met Master, Master told him he was too intellectual, too much in the mind. He needed to open up the heart. So Swami wanted it, but he didn't know how to get it. And Master said, pray for devotion. So this fellow, I probably should have said, pray that Master can wake you up in the morning and get you over here, because we need to be honest with ourselves where we are. Because we say, I say, as Swami said, there must be a matter of life and death. In the mind we think, well, I do want God, but I'm not sure if I want him that much. I mean, that's a little bit much. And we sort of put that aside. But there was a second thing. I remember he said a couple things at that satsang. One, it should be a matter of life and death to you if you want to be successful. But another thing he said, you need to be strictly honest with yourself. No, I mean, you could be honest with other people too, but particularly with ourselves. Not telling everybody else, but with yourself. Where are you right now? Now, in relation to this, we want God. All of us wouldn't be here unless we want God, but we want other things too. If we didn't want those other things, we probably would be on another plane, and we wouldn't be here, and we would be in the astral world perhaps. Or perhaps, it need not be said. We wouldn't be here if you didn't want something else besides God. And so we need to be honest with that. not be phony about it. Say, I do want God. So what am I going to do about it? But like Swami, when he felt himself, Master said he was rather dry, he needed to gain devotion, he prayed for the devotion. So we have lots of desires also, but pray to God to help him overcome those desires. Pray to God that you have what it takes to be able to do whatever it takes to be overcome those desires. And the essence of that advice is to include God in your struggle. Because we want many things. We want God, but we want all these other things too. It also invite God to join you in your struggle. So include God. I want God. I want success. God, join me in my success. Help me. I want you right there. Be with me when I'm going through my trials. Be my partner. Be the success itself I'm seeking, whatever. Be in my shoes in whatever thing I'm doing, and include him. Don't feel the necessity that, well, these things are worldly things, these things are things that are the senses, and I have to keep God out of that. No, that's exactly the wrong thing to do. You know, I've gone to visit people, and I'm sure that you have as well. You go to somebody's home, and the lady of the home, you kind of want to see the house, says, oh, well, don't go in that room. It's a mess. And because they don't want to show you that room. Well, don't be like that. No, maybe with the guests, maybe, but don't be like that with God. God comes in, invite God into all the rooms. I want to show you, Lord, here's the situation. And you show them the messy room too, and you say, look, it's a mess. You have to help me. I'm going, you're here. This is what I am. This is who I am. But I want to improve. I want to make it clean and pure for you. But you must come in and help me do that. And this is what God wants, even in all the mistakes that you're making. The Master used to say, invite God in to participate with you. If you're going to make that mistake anyway, have him there with you, because that little presence right there, you'll be reminding, I'm enjoying this, but there's something much more as well. And so include. This is, you could say, the secret of being the devotee is to include God in everything, even the things that maybe you're not always so proud about. Include in everything. Mistakes, good things, bad things. And in time, you'll find when God is there, you don't want to do those things anymore. They don't feel, I don't feel so good about that. And you'll naturally begin to move away from them. Don't hoard them. Don't clutch them or put them in the closet over there and keep everything out of there. Bring the light into everything that we're doing. And this was the way that Swami approached life. This was Master's approach to everything. Everything for him, of course, he was a master. But when I looked at Swami, and Swami, he would go and he would stub his toe. He would make this mistake. Oops, that's not the right way to go. Back up, and he would include Yogananda in terms of Divine Mother. It was his master was Yogananda into everything he did, and he was so inclusive of that. The other thing, I think, another way to look at this inclusiveness and expansiveness is. And why I chose that one is that reading this morning, one of the readings, the earlier one, is that we think, I want God. Now that's a very exalted concept. And I want God with me in my life. I want God to be with me in life. I want him to be partner with me in everything I do. Now, sometimes we think, well, gosh, I don't know if I could do that. What if you were to substitute for God the word joy? Doesn't that make sense? Wouldn't that say, I want joy with me in everything I do. I want to pray in joy. I want to meditate in joy. I want to be an instrument of joy. Now that's, of course, we'd say, yes, that's exactly what I want. Well, God is joy. That is joy. But we tend to think in terms of God as something beyond our reality of what we are experiencing right now. And I think if we get coming back to this, of just being honest with ourselves of where we are, that doesn't mean to say when we see a mistake, well, that's who I am, so that's who I am. That's not who we are. But that happens to be perhaps the dirty shirt we're wearing today. And we start to look at it with God by our side. We say, I think I'll change that shirt because it looks, it's not so nice. And so be honest. Oftentimes, how it is, people make mistakes and they like to hide the mistake. Of course, that's human nature. You want to hide, not show it off. And of course, we shouldn't show it off, exalt in it. But with God, show everything. Show it all to God. And this is, this sense of having God in our life, having joy in our life, this is the approach that Paramahansa Yogananda brought to the world when in his teachings, is to be inclusive of God and live in a state of joy. There was a story once of some of the monks had gone off to do an errand of some sort. And when they came back to Mount Washington, it was in the evening. The sun was going down, and it was in the evening. And Master was on the lawn, the grass yard in front of Mount Washington Estates, the big ashram there. And they drove up, and Master was on the lawn, and he was just swaying. He was obviously in ecstasy. And they went up to him, and he said, "You don't know how beautiful it all is. It's so beautiful." And he was just swaying in ecstasy because he saw everything in joy. And then this is the spirit that he wanted to bring to everybody, to live in that joy and to expand it. And as I read in the Whispers, to feel that through the wind and through the breeze and through the even through our voice, through our smile, that it's joy we're conveying to other people. Be an instrument of joy, and you'll become an instrument of God. And to have that feeling, that sense that joy is right here beside us at all time. The priorities of life, which was our title today, really, it's God alone that is our priority. And we, like I said with Swami G, he came to this priority, he came to it through a sense of despair. He had everything, but he seemed to have nothing. And he came to that. Now, it doesn't have to be that way. If you have a little bit of touch of the divine, that divine joy, you find that the wise person will not reject, you could say, and reject the opportunity to go forward through wisdom, through joy, through positive experiences of bliss. If you have those moments in life and are able to internalize them and go beyond them and realize it's God in everything we're doing, you don't have to wait until things absolutely fall apart. Master said that people seek God for two primary reasons. One, they seek happiness. They seek God in happiness and joy. Or two, they seek it because they suffer. Things don't work out. And as long as we have that idea that somewhere else outside of God is going to give us that, what we're looking for, eventually we have to become disappointed and we will suffer. But I always think, now that's true. Why don't I listen to that lesson and actually do that? But we can. If we're wise, we can seek God for joy. And this is why Paramahansa Yogananda brought these techniques of Kriya Yoga. The masters introduced them in the world in this age, is because through the practice of these techniques, we'll be able to have an actual living experience, a little bit of joy, a little bit of peace. And as Paramahansa Yogananda used to say, he says, once you have that little bit of taste of good cheese, you won't want stale cheese anymore. I think most of you saw that movie, Awake. And you'll remember the story about Herb Jeffries. That was my favorite story of the whole movie. Now, of course, I love the video and everything of Master that some of I've never seen before. But in terms of the stories, Herb, of course, was a jazz musician, actor also in Hollywood in Master's day, and actors in that environment. Not always the best, not always the best. But he came to Master and he said, I've always heard of what I shouldn't do. You shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do. And he says, what can you do? And Master asked him, he said, well, do you smoke? He says, yes, I do. And he says, well, you can do that. Now, Herb was very mystified about that. I can smoke. Oh, nobody, religion tells you to get rid of these habits. Well, okay. And then he said, well, and then Master asked him, what, do you drink alcohol? And Herb says, well, yes, I do. And he says, well, you can do that. Now, Herb was very puzzled. He could smoke, he could drink. So then Master said, well, you like, the ladies, chasing after the ladies. And Herb said, well, yes, I do. And he says, you can do that. And of course, now Herb was really he said, this is the path for me. I guess perhaps he was saying that. But then Master says, but I cannot promise you that once you start to practice these teachings and these techniques, that those things, you won't want those things anymore. Isn't that beautiful? I thought, that's beautiful. Because really, we all have these desires of something or another. And we think, oh, I have to get rid of these desires. Well, yes, you do. I mean, we have to, but I don't think quite the way to say it is we need to get rid of these desires. We need to rise above those desires. You see, because when something better comes along, you don't want those things anymore. And this is that better thing. If we invite into our lives, we invite God into our lives in everything we do. Let's again make that little switch. If we invite joy into everything we do, into all the closets, we find that we don't want those other things anymore. They start to go away. Don't beat on them. The Swami used to say, don't beat up the darkness with a stick. You can't get rid of it that way. Turn on the light. And that's what Paramahansa Yogananda brought. He brought that approach to life, that approach to religion, that approach to spirituality is turn on the light. Shine it into the darkest corners of everything we do. Every mistake we made, and actually mistakes, I don't think you should be too worried about mistakes. I think as long as you learn the lesson, you see, as Master said, he said, this world is made for our knowledge, our learning, and it's a school, and our entertainment. But so few people learn the lessons, and very few are entertained in the end. And so if we learn the lesson, it's just one step closer to being able to achieve our goal. So don't worry about those things. Give it to God. Say, I'll try better next time. Master said that Swami said that there was a disciple in the ashram who had a dream. It was a super conscious dream. And he said, in this dream, he saw everybody, all the disciples were running a race. They were running a race. And he said, all the disciples, every one of them, fell, stumbled. They tripped, fell in the dirt. And then he said, then some of them, they got up, they started crawling. And they kept on going. And then some of them, they crawled and they got on their knees and they got back on their feet. They started running again. He says, but there wasn't a one that didn't fall down and stumble. But it was those who got up and they kept running into the light. And that was the message that I think Master brought to all of us. And I think that's the message I'd like to leave us this morning with is get up, keep on going, and be honest with yourself, bring joy into what you're doing, and include God. You want God? Want to pray for devotion. Pray that God come to you in a way that you can receive Him and take Him in. But include Him then in everything else too. Even the mistakes, whatever you do, make Him your partner. Make Divine Mother be your companion. And then little by little, you begin to raise up, and all that other stuff that will go. And then when you say you want to come and meditate in the morning, you'll be there. You'll actually show up. You'll have what it takes to take whatever that step is, that next step for you to take on your spiritual path. Many blessings to you.